Hello, this is Leah Whitehorse from Lunar Astrology with the cosmic forecast for April 2014. So this is the month we've been waiting for. It's the Cardinal Grand Cross, it's the eclipse season, so it's all happening this month. And because there is so much going on, I have decided to focus on the Cardinal Grand Cross and the eclipses so that we can have more of a look in depth to see what's happening. So this month we have the climax to this Cardinal Grand Cross that all us astrologers have been talking about. It's formed, the cross formation is made by Uranus opposite to Mars and Jupiter opposite to Pluto. So these aspects involved are squares and oppositions. Both are tense and challenging aspects. And squares tend to indicate where there's a struggle, where you're trying to incorporate two conflicting elements, but each of them need to be expressed. Squares show where you feel at odds, or where you feel on edge, or where you feel backed into a corner, and there's a push for action and change. Oppositions by their nature tend to indicate opposing elements or points of view. Oppositions can highlight where we tend to project ourselves and project disowned aspects of ourselves onto others, typically the shadow self. And to resolve a standoff, someone has to make a move, but Mars in the mix can be volatile. The problems raging in the Ukraine at the moment are a strong example of these energies at play, and it seems no coincidence that the scenes of battle occurred on the Maiden, which is otherwise known as Independence Square. Mars is about defense and offense. Pluto is power. Uranus is change and revolution. Jupiter is about belief. Mars square Pluto tends to be ruthless. Mars square Uranus is volatile and explosive. Jupiter opposite Pluto can manifest as fanaticism. Uranus square Pluto can represent an uprising against oppression. There's no doubt that there are powerful themes at work in the wider world, but they also are playing out in our own personal lives as well. For those of us with planets or points around the 13th degree of Aries, Libra, Cancer or Capricorn, it's likely that we'll feel the pressure. Those of you with birthdays around this time, whilst the Grand Cross is active, will have this configuration in your solar return chart, so the repercussions and themes or consequences will be a year-long theme. And I count myself as one of the lucky ones, as I have my birthday on the 20th of April, right in the middle of the Cardinal Grand Cross. I wrote a very long article about the Cardinal Grand Cross on my website, and will include a small part of it here. To get an idea of how to use this energy, look to the houses where Mars, Jupiter, Uranus and Pluto are transiting in your own chart. So Mars retrograde in Libra shows where you are feeling on the defense and where you need to negotiate, where you need to compromise or agree to disagree. This area of your chart is fired up. Jupiter shows the area of life which is being expanded, where you need to broaden your understanding, where you need to gain a bigger perspective, and where you need more faith. Uranus shows where change is needed and necessary. It can show where you feel like rebelling, where you are awakening, where you need space, and where you need a more objective viewpoint. Pluto shows what's being broken down in your life, where elimination needs to happen, where you can empower yourself, and where your fears need to be faced. The trick is to use these energies that are available and to recognize where change is not only needed but required in order for you to move forwards. It's important to note that the Grand Square is going to take place on the 13th degree of each of the signs involved. Now 13 is a magical number, but it's also much maligned. In the tarot, it's the Death card. So this square has a feeling of irrevocable change. It's about eliminating aspects of your life that are no longer working for you. And to quote the Borg from Star Trek, resistance is futile. The more you resist change, then the more resistance you'll meet. Change can be frightening. It puts your guard up, and even welcome change like getting married or moving or having a baby, all these situations produce their own stresses and strains. With Mars retrograde in Libra, one of the biggest issues here is that despite our differences, we somehow have to work together. Uranus is the planet of awakening as well as revolution and shock. So part of the message of this pattern is about changing your perspective, detach from the outcome, focus on the moment. Within this grand square is a grand cross. The cross is formed by the two oppositions. X marks the spot. If you can find your center during this time, it may reveal buried treasure. The Cardinal Grand Cross is contained within two eclipses, the lunar eclipse on the 15th of April and the solar eclipse on the 29th of April. Lunar eclipses tend to be more subtle and tend to generate emotions. They are more of an inward event. Solar eclipses tend to manifest more as outside situations, events that happen to us seemingly from out of the blue. By their nature, eclipses are very difficult to predict, simply because they have a tendency to reveal what was once hidden, just like the lunar eclipse reveals the shadow of the Earth, and the solar eclipse reveals the beautiful corona around the sun that we never normally see. The lunar eclipse in Libra on the 15th of April is going to be the first in the series of 4 total lunar eclipses, 2 of which we will experience this year. And so this is a tetrad of 4 blood moons. An eclipse moon has a tendency to appear reddish in color, and superstition says that a blood moon is a warning. Whilst we do have extreme tension in the skies astrologically, I'm not prophesizing the end of days and doom and gloom, but at the same time, it is important to recognize when there are challenges ahead, as this configuration indicates. On the day of the lunar eclipse, Mercury will form a square to Pluto, which gives an obsessive edge. The mind can go into overdrive with this aspect, and at its worst, it can indicate paranoia. But it is perfect if you want to really concentrate on a project that requires obsessive attention to detail or extensive research. The moon will also be conjunct asteroid Hekate, the ancient witches goddess. Hekate is associated with crossroads, amongst other things. The eclipse then gives us a sense that we are all at a crossroads. Mercury square Pluto is urging us to open our minds to the truth. We need the truth in order to choose the right path. Hekate was also connected to places that are between, places that are not one thing or another, like a doorway or a stairway. Also times that are between, magical times like dusk, dawn, and midnight. So you may feel kind of neither here or there during this eclipse, which can be disconcerting. Hekate also guards the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead. The lunar eclipse, under Hekate's influence, lifts the veil so that you can see what was previously invisible. With the Mercury square to Pluto, however, in order to perceive this path, you need to be willing to face the darkness and fear. The lunar eclipse seems to suggest that part of the process of dealing with this Cardinal Grand Cross is to address the old ghosts that still haunt you and exorcise them. This gives you the power and the strength of Pluto and the magic of Hekate at your fingertips. The solar eclipse on the 29th of April will be in Taurus, and it continues the theme of magic and mystery. But trine to Pluto and sextile to Neptune, it suggests that empowering truths are revealed in order to attune you to your soul's purpose. A quincunx to Mars shows that in order to accept the gift of this solar eclipse, the ego may need to step aside. Quincunxes are about adjustment. Taurus is the first of the earth signs, and one basic desire of Taurus is to have. If you listen to how a young child speaks, they say things like, my cat, my dog, my daddy, it's mine. So this eclipse may remind us that nothing is truly ours. As the Native Americans say, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. The solar eclipse will be an annular eclipse. Annular means little ring. At an annular eclipse, the moon's apparent diameter is slightly smaller than the sun. So therefore, as the moon passes between the earth and the sun, here on earth we see a ring of fire. What's interesting is that whereas at the lunar eclipse we had Mercury perfecting a square to Pluto, now at the solar eclipse we have Mercury perfecting a trine to Pluto. So although the lunar eclipse may have felt mind-bending, the solar eclipse helps you to understand what's going on. My feeling is that if we don't engage with the process during the lunar eclipse by facing our fears and so on, the solar eclipse is likely to manifest as events that we can't ignore. The grand square and the ring of fire of the solar eclipse reminded me of the old phrase to square a circle. Now this phrase comes from an old Greek mathematical problem that was basically impossible. So we use the phrase to square a circle to mean when we try and do something that's impossible. So perhaps during April we'll be shown where we are trying to do the impossible. Perhaps this is why some doors will be closed, because our frantic energies are being wasted on the wrong path. But it's also important to remember that there were times when humans thought it was impossible to fly, or to capture a moving image, or to replace a human heart. Maybe the Cardinal Grand Cross will show us where we've shut down certain paths because we refuse to think of them as possible. The aspects between the solar eclipse, Mercury, Neptune and Pluto make me think that we have a chance to open our minds to the power of magic. Our minds are magical. We just need to make up our minds in order to release the magic. Against the backdrop of the Cardinal Grand Cross and eclipse season, we will also have a grand trine between Jupiter, Saturn and Chiron. So Chiron is like a release point, and Venus will also take part for a time because she will be conjunct Chiron. The grand trine comes into play around the 21st of April and will remain until June. Working quietly in the background, this grand trine shows that if you could believe it, you can make it happen. Chiron is the bridge between what was and what is. So healing this grand cross dilemma comes from accepting responsibility for ourselves and having faith in each other. Venus conjunct Chiron shows that love is the key. So this month I chose the Mythic Tarot deck, and the Four of Swords was the card that came out. And this card seems to capture perfectly this feeling of being at a crossroads, described by the lunar eclipse and the conjunction to Hekate. In this deck, we see the main character sitting calmly before 4 crossed swords, each pointing in different directions. And the character's gaze is very calm and very clear, and it seems to penetrate us. It's generally a feeling of being cool, calm, and collected, and it feels very centered. Traditionally, the Four of Swords is about taking time out. Sometimes it shows sickness and a need for healing. So the message from the tarot this month is really connecting with Chiron as well, because it's reiterating the sense that in order to make the right choice, in order to be able to perceive the information the universe is giving us, we need to come back to center. We need to sit still. We need to put down our arms and defenses, and be open to negotiation, be open to listening. And that way we can find some sense of inner peace, which is depicted in this card.
All hail to the Queen of Stars.